Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Throne of Seal episode number 185 based on novel. So let's start. The sealed divine throne of eternity and creation became an eternal armor that covered Long Houchen's body entirely. Long Houchen felt as if he had reached the realm defined by Electrolux when he was holding the sun, moon, and stars in his hands. He held the sword of eternity in front of him, and an overwhelming swordsmanship turned to something tangible. The great black and purple sword of the Knight of Judgment rested on the sword of eternity. Dark fog appeared and turned into the most ferocious devil towards Long Houchen, which tried to devour him. Then the nine-color light bloomed, which made an impact to the dark fog before it shattered. Long Houchen's arm shook and the infinite power burst out that made the Knight of Judgment and the Bone Dragon King retreat into distant. At the same time, the dark elements in the air were rapidly merging towards Long Houchen. It then, unexpectedly, turned into pure non-attribute elements and went inside Long Houchen's body through the nine colors glow. With the power of eternity in one's hand, one could have the whole world. Long Houchen also did not know the extent of his power. He only felt that the domain of light God and the domain of eternity were fully integrated and that his power seemed to be endless. This was the first time that he had used the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation. Countless experiences and message from the throne kept pouring inside his heart and his soul. Therefore, he did not take the initiative to attack the Knight of Judgment. The Knight of Judgment was anxious as the power of the imperial weapon was stronger than he thought. Long Houchen was clearly inferior to him, but he could not see a way of winning if he was to directly fight against Long Houchen. The Knight of Judgment and Bone Dragon King roared at the same time. They both rushed towards Long Houchen once again and launched a comprehensive attack. Long Houchen continually avoided the attacks of the two great sovereign kings by fluttering his sword of eternity up and down with ease. As they attacked, Long Houchen was motionless. The tip of the nine-color sword wavered repeatedly to obstruct the opponent's attacks. While Long Houchen was trying to stabilize the fight, the others were fighting in full swing. Kia was up against the King of Shadow, whose body was completely black and elusive. When she felt his power, she knew right away that his power was even scarier than the Witch King. An accident soon occurred right after her beginning to fight with the King of Shadow. Kia's sickle of death was shining brightly, but she was surprised to find that the sickle of death did not cut through his body but was only swept through the air. When she looked back, King of Shadow's body was already less than 100 meters away from Hao Yu. Kia was astounded. Then a powerful white light burst out from her body and spread across a kilometer, formed a white curtain of light in front of the King of Shadow. However, the King of Shadow did not seem to care, but he failed to go through the curtain. When his dark shadow touched the light of purification, a shrill cry of soul broke out, and King of Shadow's body bounced back rapidly. Kia gave a cold snort and thought to herself, "You could avoid my physical attacks, but who could escape from my light of purification?" Kia's power was the most suitable against the undead. Her inheritance from death, the most powerful ability to purify the undead. Though his practice level was extremely high, the King of Shadow was burned by the light of purification due to his carelessness. At the same time, Kia lifted her left hand and a flash of gold came over on the palm of her hand, on which a tiny golden 7-layers pagoda appeared. A flash of light with different color released from the pagoda and flew to where Hao Yu was. The sickle of death in Kia's hand made 1,000 shadows in the air, and the domain of purification was spread out in full force against the King of Shadow. There were 12 streams of light from the Tower of Eternity, and as they fell, they formed a circle to protect Hao Yu. Was it not in the Tower of Eternity that the 12 saints had been tested at so often? Electrolux, the god of the dead and the scourge of the undead, gave Kia not only the Tower of Eternity, but the 12 saints who had fought with him in battle and had done so much good. However, since the Tower of Eternity had been lowered from the edge of the Imperial weapon to the domain of Divine's artifact, the strength of the 12 saints had been weakened to a certain extent. Their strengths and practice levels were rank 9, but they had no domain ability. But even so, there were 12 in total with thousands of years of combat experience. At the time of at the Derby Temple, Kia, by virtue of the Tower of Eternity, was almost invincible if not forbidden to use weapons. Even Long Houchen was no match for her. Of course, Long Houchen's overall strength was unmatched in the team now that he had the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation. The 12 saints were guarding Hao Yu. With thousands of years of experience in battle, even if these kings broke through the blockade of the Light Dawn Demon Hunter group, it was unlikely that they could harm Hao Yu directly. Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi watched the battle in the air from the nearest place to Hao Yu. They both felt dazed. The shock in their hearts were lifted to the top, especially at the moment when sealed divine throne of eternity and creation appeared. Yang Wenjiao never thought of comparing himself with Long Haochen because he knew that he could not catch up with Long Haochen. The King of Shadow was indeed as powerful as Kia had predicted. After the damage made to his soul, he soon calmed down. The grey air diffused from him and it did not dissipate even when it came in contact with the light of purification. It created a battleground space for him and Kia. A cold and gloomy aura attacked Kia, who was holding the sickle of death. She did not move. The domain of purification continued to emanate, but not to a great extent. It was only about 20 meters in diameter. With this distance, she would have time to respond King of Shadow's attack from all sides. Suddenly, she felt a chill running down her spine. Kia turned around without any hesitation and her sickle of death cut through a shrill cold electricity. It was the Seven of Death, the unpassable death. Ding, with a crisp sound, the King of Shadow's body flashed and disappeared. The grey sheen around his body blocked out Kia's light of purification, but he no longer lingered inside her domain of purification and retreat. Kia's eyes narrowed as she was taken aback with surprise from the unprecedented enemy. Even though she was an assassin, she was attacked by the King of Shadows. But she had no choice. She was far less capable of concealment than her opponent right now. The King of Shadow couldn't use his domain to attack, but it increased his ability to hide himself and increased his resistance level instead. Otherwise he would not be able to block the light of purification. But this King of Shadow was an undead creature, and as long as it was an undead creature, there was nothing that cannot be restrained by the light of purification. The opponent might be able to maintain the erosion of unpurified light for a short time, but in the long run it was still impossible. Otherwise, with the strength of King of Shadow, he should have chosen to fight hard directly, rather than a game of tactics. Want to use up all my energy? Kia sneered. Her practice level was not nearly as good as that of Long Haochen, but the domain of purification was no less restorative than Long Haochen's domain of light. The light of purification was purifying the aura of death all the time, especially in this place full of undead creatures. Then, suddenly, the chill came over and Kia's sickle of death struck out again. This time Kia's body shook violently and her face changed color. The King of Shadow was so powerful that both Kia and her sickle of death were shaken vigorously. And she could only sense when her opponent was close. The King of Shadow's body existed only in a form of soul. Therefore, physical attacks would not cause him any harm. Kia's situation was getting worse as she was continually beaten. She couldn't use her only attack that worked against him, the Seven Deaths attack, since the attack was close to being used up. Just like how Long Haochen was against the Knight of Judgment and Bone Dragon King, it was the same at Kia's side. However, Long Haochen was holding down his opponents, but Kia was being held down by the King of Shadow. Kia was trying to seek out for the King of Shadow while Wei Ting was trying to find the King of Blame. These two kings had one thing in common: their bodies were not physical. Beside the Knight of Judgment, these two kings were also difficult to deal with. Not one, but thousands of swords of king were in the air that constantly blocked the King of Blame's route. The King of Blame was strong, but his attack ability was mainly shown on the soul. Wei Ting's power of light was inherited from Long Haochen. As the Queen of Light Elves, Wei Ting's soul was extremely stable, and the body she had now was not her own. Her soul form was the light element spirit. And after merged with the two Excalibur swords, she had the ability to solidify her soul. It was the perfect ability to suppress the King of Blame's attacks. Therefore, Wei Ting completely suppressed her opponent. The King of Blame also tried to break through the blockade. But with all the swords of King above, he was unable to get to Wei Ting's body. All he did was to constantly dodging her attacks. It was an embarrassment to him. On the battlefield, members of the Light Dawn Demon Hunter group were being suppressed, except for Long Haochen and Wei Ting. Chen Yinga was fighting against the Witch King. They were both good at summoning. In terms of domain, Chen Yinga's domain of beast couldn't suppress the opponents, but could enhance the summoned creatures. However, the undead creatures summoned by the Witch King were superior in rank to those summoned by her. The space of their battle was the largest. Chen Yinga, with the enhancement of the domain of beast, had summoned 36 9-rank warcraft to attack the Witch King. But the Witch King also summoned an army of hundreds of bone dragons. Chen Yinga was suppressed by the outnumbered enemy. 6 orange-color crystal balls constantly hovered and shone. Chen Yinga's holy clothes with hundreds of spiritual pellets released a strong light as it helped her to recover her spiritual force. She must complete the second summoning before the army of bone dragons crushed all her summoned beast. The Witch King kept attacking Chen Yinga constantly, which was blocked by her beasts. Although she had an imperial weapon with her, the gap between the two was too big. It was predictable that after some time, Chen Yinga will be defeated by the Witch King. Wang Yuan, who was in a fight with the Skeleton King, was not in a better situation than Chen Yinga. At the beginning of the battle, the Skeleton King turned into a huge black bone knife. With the absolute advantage of the size differences, he launched crazy attacks towards Wang Yuan. Wang Yuan's left hand held a giant spirit shield and in her right hand was the bloody storm. With full resistance, she was still retreating. Skeleton King was too powerful. Each bombardment caused Wang Yuan to retreat back in the air. Wang Yuan's domain of blood was counterbalanced by the Skeleton King's domain of devoured soul. Their forces completely clashed. If it wasn't for the Aegis that was impregnated with empty silver crystals and had achieved the level of immortality, there would have been a number of powerful attacks that Wang Yuan wouldn't have been able to withstand. Even so, she still transported in the space of time to keep the Skeleton King occupied and far away from Hao Yu. Boom, an exploding sound accompanied by a burst of intense purple electric light reflected on one end of the battlefield. The electric light burst out from Sima Xian's power of light. He was holding the balls of light in both hands while pressing the huge metal ball against his chest. His power of light was enlarged and amplified. The purple electric attack was also enhanced to an extremely terrifying extent. 100 meters across from Sima Xian was the King of Loath. Covered with pale white fat, he was looking down at his chest. In the middle of his chest, a blackened scar with a diameter of several meters went deep down into his layer of fat. It was so deep that his internal organs could be seen. With his left hand, he pounded his chest, and in his right hand was a giant rust-colored iron hook. A crimson color glowed from the chain behind the iron hook that was connected to the front as he went straight to Sima Xian. The King of Loath did not continuously pound his chest without purpose. He was squeezing a lot of yellow fat around his wound and burying the wound completely. He recovered with an astonishing speed. Damn it, this is bad. Sima Xian was depressed. He went for the King of Loath because he looked big enough to make a good opponent. But who would have thought that he used such a terrifying iron hook? His attack was too frightening. Sima Xian's power of light fell on him several times with smash, crush, and triple blast attacks. The King of Loath withstood every attack. Even if he was beaten, his fat skin recovered in no time. Sima Xian tried to use his purple electric light attack. Although there was more damage, it was still not enough to bring down the King of Loath. The most terrifying thing was that, despite the size of the King of Loath, his hook was a deft maneuver. When encountered, the King of Loath's iron hook would immediately produce light with an absorption effect which made it hard for the opponent to run away. If Sima Xian was not equipped with a special effect, he would have suffered great damage. As soon as the iron hook was thrown over again, Sima Xian groaned angrily and roared up to the sky with a fierce face. In his hands, he swept out a powerful shot of light and hit it head-on. He got angry, too. Two long-range heavy weapons collided in the air and exploded with sparks. Pellet of powerful light had no advantage in size or weight. But it was elevated greatly, with powers unmatched by the hook of the King of Loath. Sounds exploded in quick succession. The iron hook was finally hit off to the side. Sima Xian flapped his wings and soared higher. He glanced at King of Loath and said, "Not only you are bigger than me but also your weapon is bigger than mine. Thus, I'll compete with you to see whose is bigger." Sima Xian tossed a powerful shot of light up in his hand. A strange golden sheen rose from the center of the great pellet of light. This golden light was flashing in 7 colors. Immortal? Did the pellet of light upgrade it to an immortal level? At the same time, Sima Xian's body was also shining. He shook himself and became bigger in an instant. In the blink of an eye, his height was more than 100 meters, which was the same as that of the King of Loath. The size of his mighty pellet of light was also increasing. The diameter seemed to be about 50 meters. The King of Loath looked at Sima Xian and then looked at the iron hook in his hand. He was in a daze as he also felt crisis. His small eyes became fierce as a dark green fog burst out from his body. It covered past where Sima Xian was. This was the domain of plague. The best for group warfare. No matter how strong one could be, one would be eroded in the plague. The longer the fight, the more severe the erosion would be. Sima Xian was surprised, but he did not avoid the plague. He stepped out of the void and headed to the King of Loath with a blast of light on his head. Long Haochen brought 2 precious den medicine at Demon Hunter Trade Center which can help level 9 domain to condense. One was given to Cymaxian and the other one to Linshin. Linshin had completed his Holy Yang domain while Cymaxian not only made big progress in his weapons, but also gained his own domain. His domain was also a domain weapon, like Long Ya Ting. He liked his pellet of light so much that his domain evolved perfectly as he wanted. Not only his body size increased, but also strength, defense and the pellet of light. The bald priest, Cymaxian, incarnated into a humanoid weapon. Though, the disadvantage was that it could not attack remotely. It was unable to use any ability and it drained mana very quickly. It was like two giants collide together. Direct one-on-one fight. It was like flesh colliding with flesh. The king of loads fat splattered everywhere. In this whole battlefield, their fight was spectacular. Their fight was a collision of bodies. However, on the other side, the battle between Li Xin and the Cave Spider King was a fight between magic. With the Holy Yang spell up over his head, Lin Xin's two immortal-level weapons shone with glorious lights. The fire of Immortal Dragon constantly fired as the Holy Yang spell constantly erupted a powerful blue flame that aimed towards the Cave Spider King. After he learned about the Holy Yang spell, Lin Xin became like a tiger with wings added to it. The domain he practiced was also based on the Holy Yang spell, which made it reach unprecedented level. The Cave Spider King's practice level was more than 300,000 and his strong poison spell was also very powerful. However, the flame on the spirit of the undead had a certain degree of restraint. However, as Lin Xin wore the Torch of Praise, which was attached with light, the two sides were even. And it seemed that Lin Xin was at an advantage in this battle. In this black and red world, Lin Xin's mana recover rapidly. Therefore, he did not lose any of his strength while he attacked, which made the Cave Spider King was very confused. Evenly matched, there were two other battlefields, Han Yu, the sealed divine knight of destruction and forgiveness, with the sealed divine throne of fear and sadness. The dark green armor covered his whole body. His weapon was only one shield. On that dark green shield, there were two patterns. One was the fearful devil and the other was the sad angel. His opponent was the Zombie King. Despite his stiff body, the Zombie King moved as fast as lightning. But no matter how fast he moved, Han Yu always came in front and blocked him every time. The Zombie King's attack also always got blocked by the great shield of fear and sorrow. His soul's fire quivered violently. If there was an inevitable lag in his movement, Han Yu would hit him immediately. Though, Han Yu was not actively attacking the Zombie King, but he had a solid defense which made the Zombie King completely helpless. Zhong Fangfang was the sealed divine knight of wisdom and inheritance, dressed in the sealed divine throne of wisdom and spirit. He fought exactly like Han Yu in the battlefield. Both of these men were extremely capable knights. The sealed divine throne of wisdom and spirit gave him a hammer and a round shield. Every time the hammer struck, it exploded with an extremely strong light element. The power of that explosion was even stronger than that of the great pellet of light. The King of Hell's Flames attack was just as powerful. But nothing could cause harm against Zhong Fangfang's solid defense. From Han Yu and Zhong Fangfang's battles, it was shown how much the sealed divine throne improved the strength of these knights. Both the Zombie King and the King of Hell's Flame were above the practice level of 300,000. But they fought equally. No one could cross the line beyond these two sealed divine knights. It was difficult to keep the situation balanced. In this kind of situation, if there was just one shortfall, then all would be utterly defeated. It was especially true for the Light Dawn Demon Hunter group, as they were fighting inside the enemy's territory and there were many undead creatures watching from the distance. After countless attacks with the Knight of Judgment and the Bone Dragon King, they were subdued. As the Knight of Judgment looked at Long Haochen's body entirely covered in white armor, he felt powerless. As the most powerful king in this world, he had been in charge of everything here for thousands of years. But now, a strong player from another world with a terrifying pure light attribute, spiritual power, and as well as his imperial weapon, had come to challenge him. Even if he was in the 9 level of rank 7, he wasn't a match for this new strong player. Long Haochen quietly felt of the increasing pressure brought by the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation as his perception covered the whole audience. He could sense every change on the battlefield. With the eternal armor, the Knight of Judgment and the Bone Dragon King couldn't suppress him. But it wouldn't be easy for Long Haochen to beat them either. These two great kings' practice levels were close to 1 million and their strengths were extremely strong. Moreover, they might not have fought in their best potential yet. Long Haochen was supposed to only keep Han Yu through its evolution, and not to fight these sovereign kings. Therefore, it was best for him to save his strength until crucial situation. He also had another trick that he hasn't used yet, and now was not the time to use it. After his comrades upgraded to level 9, they did not practice much. But these life and death battles were more effective than the practice at the temple. It also allowed them to get used to their new weapons. So, Long Houchen didn't rush to go all out, as he did not think that his comrades were in real danger. Hao Yu was calmly crawling on the hill, but now it looked as if it was lifeless. The amethyst scales had lost their glory, and it was only crawling calmly and quietly. Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi were the closest to Hao Yu and had been watching its development. The two, though had not reached level 9, were the Night Temple's strong younger generation. When they cast their eyes on Hao Yu, there was an indescribable sense of fear. The calm Hao Yu was like a black hole. Yang Wenjiao tried to look at Hao Yu's state with his own perception. As he began, he found out that his senses connected to his soul further were to be sucked away. Hao Yu's silence made Yang Wenjiao and Duan Yi felt a big responsibility. No one knew how long the battle would last. The battle had to continue until Hao Yu completed its evolution. At the same time, they both felt deeply ashamed. They wanted to fight in a battle with the sovereign kings in the sky right now. Their strengths were far from enough. The soul's fire in the Knight of Judgment's eyes was beating constantly while emitting a dark and cold color. After his and the Bone Dragon King's attacks converged, his momentum was slowly rising. Long Houchen felt that the next time he broke out in full force, it would be more frightening than ever. The Knight of Judgment was waiting for the Light Dawn Demon Hunter group to make a mistake. Once there was a small breakthrough, they would have an advantage overall. Long Houchen held him back with the Imperial weapon, but the Knight of Judgment had enough faith in his own strength to hold him down even if he could not defeat Long Houchen. From all the players that came to this world, only Long Houchen made him feel the threat. Just as the Knight of Judgment predicted, a mistake occurred. The first mistake was made by Wang Yuan. The Skeleton King's attacks were so ferocious that his enormous size didn't bother him at all. The black bone knife in the air constantly turned into a black lightning and stormed at Wang Yuan. Wang Yuan was good at attacking, not defending. Therefore, she could only attack the opponent while releasing her domain of blood. Crack, the black bone knife in the air turned into a black lightning and struck Wang Yuan. Wang Yuan did not dare to use her fragile bloody storm to ward off the attack. She swept the spirit shield in her left hand away and it collided with the black bone knife. The spirit shield, with 7 empty silver crystals, was fully capable of generating a layer of space turbulence when it collided with any attack. But this time was different. The blow of the Skeleton King was evidently premeditated. When his black bone knife hit the shield, the knife suddenly became elusive and flashed 3 times the speed that naked eyes could not distinguish. Then the knives violently stamped on the shield 3 times. Wang Yuan groaned as she could no longer withstand the tremendous attack. She was struck in the air and fell down to the ground. The Skeleton King quickly caught up with her and a thick black layer was rising from his feet as it concentrated around the knife. At this moment, his dark-colored bones seemed to have faded a little. Only the black bone knife was emitting a deep dark color. Wang Yuan felt the pain in her fractured left arm and her body was severely bleeding. The Skeleton King was evidently waiting for this chance. In preparation for the black bone knife, his domain launched a large spirit force to lock Wang Yuan, which made it hard for her to open the door of space. There was no other way for her to run. She had to fight. Wang Yuan clenched her teeth. Although her heart was fully unwilling, she knew she could not resist this blow no matter what. Although Long Houchen would certainly save her, how could she make up for her shortfall? While the black bone knife was in the air, a golden figure suddenly appeared without any warning in front of Wang Yuan. There was a sudden burst of intense light. 12 golden lightning bolts thundered down on the black bone knife. Boom! A legendary golden shield in the hands of the golden figure prevented the strike of the black bone knife after it was struck by the golden lightning. A strong golden light flickered as the black bone knife swung over. That huge shield was broken into pieces. A legendary weapon got damaged. This golden figure was Zhong Fangfang's second spirit that split from his body. While Zhong Fangfang was in the battlefield, he was also paying attention to Wang Yuan's situation. With the help of the sealed divine throne he was invincible. He was fully aware of Wang Yuan. And in the most crucial moment, he quickly took action and split himself and came with his shield. The light of the 12 judgments was fully prepared just in time to save Wang Yuan. Yuan, restore your power, Zhong Fangfang told Yuan while his whole body was emitting golden light and shrewdly rushing towards the Skeleton King. He attacked the Skeleton King with all his might. With his practices, his spiritual body also evolved. Zhong Fengfeng's split spiritual body had evolved to its peak. This body was 90% stable, but he could only be in this stage for 2 hours. At the same time, though he could use other weapon, he couldn't use Zhong Fengfeng's weapons. After all, a split body was just a split body. And Zhong Fengfeng was also distracted by his own fight with the King of Hell's Flame. However, he was mainly on the defense. He made up for Wang Yuanyuan's gap in her battle. Wang Yuanyuan and Zhong Fengfeng had known each other for a long time, therefore, she understood Zhong Fengfeng's meaning right away. He meant for her to concentrate on restoring her spiritual power. At the same time, the giant spirit shield raised up high. A silver light spread from Wang Yuanyuan's feet and slowly raised upward. Her whole body was burning with a layer of silver flame. Her eyes turned blood red and they were glistening like ruby. With her whole body in silver glow, she looked as ominous as ever. Wang Yuanyuan had a nickname of the Bloody Goddess of War. Her hand suffered a great wound from the Skeleton King. She did not feel defeated. Instead, she felt inspired. The silver space became more and more flourished. Wang Yuanyuan suddenly looked up and screamed. Her bloody eyes instantly burst out as it became 2 lines of bloody light that rose up in the sky. In the void, a silver door of light opened bathed in a bloody light. Then, thousands of silver lights burst out from Wang Yuanyuan's body. The intense fluctuations of space made everything around Wang Yuanyuan's body seem distorted, except the 2 lines of blood that rose from the sky. They diffused when they touched the silver door. They fell down as a layer of bloody light and covered the ground. Wang Yuanyuan's right foot suddenly stomped on the ground and her scream suddenly became more intense. The giant spirit shield in her left hand raised high as a layer of blood crawled over the giant shield like blood vessels. A huge column of silver light shot up into the sky. It swallowed the silver door in the air. Everyone's eyes were fixed at the same place as the warped space's waves shook everyone on the battlefield. The silver light slowly faded away and a huge figure appeared out of nowhere. The figure was 10 meters high and covered in silver armor. The armor was shining of bloody red aura instead of silver light. In order to save Long Haochen, all members of the Light Dawn Demon Hunter group were completing with the Saints of the Tower of Eternity. Wang Yuanyuan once ignited her own space attribute spiritual power with the explosion of spirit, which beat the giant spirit of divine health and defeated one of the saints. Besides, Zhong Fengfeng's split body helped her when she almost lost her life in the battle. However, at this moment, Wang Yuanyuan was not like before anymore. She was now in level 9 and with her domain of blood, she had been fully qualified to display the giant spirit of the immortal shield. After 7 silver crystals had been set, the giant spirit shield would be equivalent to those immortal weapons. This time, the spirit shield looked clearly different than before. It looked like a female warrior. It was exactly the enlarged version of Wang Yuanyuan. Her eyes were in silver glint and the undulations of her spirit power were completely bloody red. A strong bloodthirsty aura gushed out from her body along with a frightening power that even the sovereign kings were scared. At this time, Zhong Fengfeng's split body was unable to withstand the Skeleton King's powerful attack anymore. His split body was greatly injured by the Skeleton King's knife. If one split body was injured too severely, it would disappear sooner. And that was the case right now. The split body in the air turned into spots of golden light and disappeared. With a flash of silver light, Wang Yuanyuan's body stood in front of the Skeleton King. Though she was enlarged, she was still less than half of the Skeleton King's height. However, her shield was bigger than she was. She swept her huge shield and smashed it against the Skeleton King's sword. This time, Wang Yuanyuan did not retreat. She screamed fiercely as she magnified her bloody storm attack countless times against the shaking the Skeleton King. It was a crazy bloody outbreak. Then she approached him with her strongest attack, the Dimensional Storm. After Wang Yuanyuan became a giant spirit, it was not just her body size that was enlarged but also her weapon. Bloody Storm did not increase in the attack power, but its attack power greatly increased due to the increased size. It seemed like the powerful Dimensional Storm was about to tear the sky apart. The Skeleton King struggled violently but he was continually streaked by the sharp teeth of the Bloody Storm. This was the first time that Wang Yuanyuan still had the upper hand in a one-on-one battle. However, the Skeleton King was very strong. His skeleton was almost as strong as a piece of epic weapon. His body did not get hurt critically after that crazy and violent collision. Domains, weapons, and even bodies all collided with each other during attacks that constantly burst out into furious crashes. Wang Yuanyuan's strength was comprehensively improved. Therefore, she stood up against the Skeleton King as she believed that she should not lose to the opponent. The Knight of Judgment was disappointed. A breakthrough finally begun, and he was ready to take action against Long Haochen. But he didn't know that the enemy was so tenacious and was able to withstand the pressure. However, he still felt a little disdain as he was very familiar with the Skeleton King. The Skeleton King was definitely the most powerful one among the sovereign kings. He didn't have many skills, but he combined both physical training of attack and defense. Therefore, he was extremely solid in both defense and offense. Wang Yuanyuan now seemed to be on par with him, but it was clearly just a temporary outburst. Once it was over, the Skeleton King would still be the winner. However, that was not the only breakthrough. While Wang Yuanyuan was trying hard to stand against the Skeleton King, Chen Yinge and Sai Maxian were both in crisis situation. Chen Yinge completed her second summoning. A total of 36 level 9 creatures rushed out from the door of the living and fought with the bone dragons summoned by the Witch King. There was also a large amount of bone dragons but still less than Chen Yinge summoned beasts. The bone dragons that Witch King summoned were the same kind and all had the same attributes, attacks, and defenses. And for Chen Yinge, she used her domain to increase her summoned beasts' warcraft. But there was a lack of command constraints in order to speed up the recovery of her psychic power. If it wasn't for the light of repeating Death's triple summoning, she wouldn't be able to hold on. Chen Yinge, who owned the domain of Beast, should not be so different from the Witch King. But the current battlefield was not suitable for Chen Yinge to fight because this world was full of undead creatures. If she wanted to summon, she had to summon creatures from the other world instead. This made her become completely underpowered. Nevertheless, the performance of McDull was very eye-catching. It turned into a devil dragon and resisted Witch King's attack multiple times. When the situation seemed bad, it turned into a four-heads chimera and used 4 attributes at the same time to help Chen Yinge to maintain the situation. The soul's fire in Witch King's eye throbbed violently. Then he took the staff in his hand up front and a shrill shriek sounded continuously. All of a sudden, the Bone Dragon's attacks became even crazier. When the Bone Dragon King surrendered to the Knight of Judgment, all of the Bone Dragon King's subordinates became under the Knight of Judgment. The Witch King had a close relationship with the Knight of Judgment since both of them were couples when they were still alive. So, the Knight of Judgment handed over the Bone Dragons to the Witch King. Otherwise it was impossible to summon so many Bone Dragons with solely Witch King's strength. The Witch King only ranked 4th among the 10 sovereign kings. But with an army of Bone Dragons, the Witch King was second only to the combination of Knight of Judgment and Bone Dragon King. Not only did the Bone Dragons in the air attack with full force, but even those that had already been shattered began to slowly regroup on the ground. As undead creatures, the only way to kill these Bone Dragons completely was to put out their souls' fires. And how could Chen Yinge, who was the underdog right now, achieve this? Sai Maxian was also in crisis. The King of Lode's fat defense was extremely strong. Sai Maxian had the upper hand when he was just released from his domain and by the virtue of strength of the powerful pellet of light. But the King of Lode was like a giant tumbler. Every time one looked at him, it was like he was going to be knocked over, but then he rapidly recovered. His body was constantly crushed and blasted by the powerful pellet of light, but soon those wounds recovered. As time went by, the plague cloud on Sai Maxian's erosion also began to intensify. Although the light element purified some part, it was the King of Lode's domain after all. The longer the time passed by, the dizzier Sai Maxian's mind became. Moreover, he had only recently possessed the domain. Although the outbreak was strong enough to fight King of Lode, the domain weapon cost a lot of power. Thus, he would not be able to hold on for a long time. Sai Maxian's energy was consumed continuously as his huge body became more unstable. The King of Lode suddenly swung his iron hook out of his hand. This time, it was neither against Sai Maxian's body nor his pellet of light. There was a crisp sound as the iron hook went straight and hit the chain behind the pellet of light. The iron hook suddenly folded forward and locked it up completely. The King of Lode then pulled it back strongly and the iron hook glided against the chain, which made series of sparks. Eventually stopped at the position of the pellet and dragged the huge metal ball. Even though the King of Lode was fat, he was actually very smart. Though Sai Maxian's attacks hurt him badly and he could not resist the power of his weapon, he still had advantage over Sai Maxian because his armor of fat suit's defense was comparable to the level of an imperial weapon. And he finally seized his chance of getting Sai Maxian's strong pellet of light as his own weapon. He liked Sai Martian's pellet of light, and it occurred to him that the weapon was capable of becoming larger. Two huge forces suddenly pulled at the same time, and then two chains instantly stretched straight. There was a gap between the two sides, but Sai Maxian, with strength alone, was not King of Loath's opponent, and his body immediately was pulled over. However, Sai Maxian did not let go because he needed the pellet of light, which was his most important skill. If he were to let it go, the gap between him and the King of Loath would be too large. Even his domain relied on it. When it was possible to form a Horcrux within the great pellet of light, the weapon of terrible destruction might even evolve into an artifact. The soul's fire inside the King of Loath's eyes was beating vigorously with a deadly white ray of light as he triumphantly pulled Sai Maxian closer and closer. The domain of plague emitted a thick stench that constantly eroded Sai Martian's body. But then, a huge blue ball of fire suddenly flew over and struck against the King of Loath's iron hook strongly. A roar rang up, accompanied by a burst of countless blue sparks. Many of those blue sparks stained the King of Loath's body and burned off the fat around his whole body. At the same time, a layer of divine golden light inside the seared blue flame had lessened the burning plague cloud by a lot. This video will end here.